There were some major changes in the real estate world last year due to a major lawsuit against the largest real estate association in the country, and it changed the way homes are bought and sold. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Living in Salem, Oregon YouTube channel. I am your host, Ryan Welty, and today we are talking about the National Association of Realtors, or NAR, settlement that happened in August of 2024. The lawsuit against NAR started back in 2019 and ended in August of 2024 in a settlement with a large payout going to the class action plaintiffs, and also a few rule changes that go to all realtor members, along with any MLSs or multiple listing services that are realtor sponsored. In this video, we're not going to go into specifics of the lawsuit, but we are going to talk about how the rule changes affected buyers. Now, if you are a seller, this rule change definitely affected you, and I have a video linked here for you walking through the specific changes. Now, there are two specific rule changes that affected the real estate industry. The first being that any real estate agent working with the buyer has to have a buyer's representation agreement before conducting any real estate activity with that buyer, such as showing homes or writing offers. Now, these representation agreements were kept pretty loose. There's a few required fields that have to be in any of them, but people are allowed to make their own representation agreements. Specific companies are making their own. Here in Oregon, there is a standard set of forms that most real estate agents use, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. There are two options in our standard forms, and there's an exclusive or non-exclusive form. We're going to be talking about the exclusive. There's not a lot of uses for a non-exclusive form. Typically, if you sign a non-exclusive form with an agent, you're going to get not as great of service because they think you're going to be working with someone else as well, and they're not as motivated to help you. There are a few circumstances where these forms come in handy though, so if we meet together, feel free to ask me about them, can talk to you about those circumstances. Now, the first required field is who the contract is with, and that's going to be the real estate agent and the buyer. That's a pretty simple one. Your second required field is the length of the agreement. Now, this can go anywhere from 1 day to 24 months. I recently had a client tell me that in the past they had a real estate agent that tried to sign them up as a client for life, saying if they ever purchased a property in their city of service, that they would be using them no matter what. Now, the new rules protect people against this kind of predatory agent that wants to sign you up for life, because you can only sign up for 24 months, otherwise the contract is going to be void after that point. Now, if you want to work with someone for longer than that, once you get to that 24-month point, you can just re-sign a new contract, but this gives the buyer a little bit more control over who they're working with. It makes it so you can't have those long-term agreements. On the other side of the coin is a very short agreement. Now, these can be really useful if you have not met your real estate agent before and you want to make sure you guys are a good fit. I, as a real estate agent, also like these because sometimes the client might not be a great fit for me, and it makes it so we can kind of have this trial period where we make sure we're a good fit for each other. Now, the third required part of any real estate form is going to be the compensation due to the real estate agent. Now, this is negotiated between the real estate agent and the buyer, and this was a really important part of the lawsuit. So around this section of the forms, there's going to be a statement that says this is a negotiable fee, meaning that you can try to negotiate it. Now, this does not mean that the person you're talking to will negotiate their fee, but it does mean across the industry as a whole, this is not a standard fee, that there are other agents out there that charge more, that charge less than the person you're talking to, and there are other options for you. So make sure you're aware that there are options and this fee is not set in stone. We will talk a little bit more about the compensation a little bit later in the video. So those are the three required fields of the real estate agreement. Now, there are lots of optional fields that can be included in any contract. There is a sign-on fee, an early deposit fee, maybe an early termination fee, or a sale fail fee. I've seen all of those in real estate agreements. There's also spots, sorry, just looking across. There's also spots to talk about your search options, what you're specifically looking for. Then one of the parts I like about our forms is there is a responsibility section, and this outlines the responsibilities the agent has to the buyer and the responsibilities the buyer has to the agent. Because since you're entering a contract between two parties, both parties have some responsibilities to each other, and that will outline it there. Well, that was the first rule change, kind of a lengthy one. Now, the second rule change is a lot simpler but has major impacts in the industry, and that is that multiple listing services, or MLSs, are no longer allowed to publish sellers' offers of compensation to buyers' agents. Now, if you're not involved in the industry, this might seem like a small point, but this really was one of the main points of the lawsuit against NAR, where the plaintiffs were claiming that NAR was fixing prices for buyers' agents by having the sellers offer this. Before the NAR changes, buyers and buyers' agents could go online and find what sellers were offering to the buyer's agent. Now, this was a number negotiated by the seller's agent during the initial negotiations to list the house. The seller's agent would charge probably somewhere between 4 and 6% to the seller, and then tell them that they were going to give a portion of that percentage to a buyer's agent. And whatever the seller and the seller's agent decided in that meeting, they would list online, put in the multiple listing service, and a buyer's agent and the buyer could look online and see what that number was. Now, post-lawsuit, sellers can still offer a contribution to the buyer's agent commission, but they cannot post it on a MLS website. Well, what does this mean for you as a buyer when you are trying to purchase a home? Well, my first recommended step would be to set up a buyer's consultation with a real estate agent. The situation you do not want to find yourself in is finding a house you love. You're not working with anyone yet, so you just call a random real estate agent and you meet them there at the house, and you don't know there's these contracts you have to sign, and they're trying to force you to sign a contract in the driveway before you can go look at the house. Now, this makes so you don't have time to read through the contract, and you can get pressured into signing a contract you don't know the details of. So I strongly recommend setting up a buyer's consultation. Even if you just have the earliest thoughts of moving, purchasing a home, set that up so you can have someone set up beforehand, before that urgency comes along, so you're not pressured into signing some contract. Buyer's consultations can be done in person over Zoom, and they talk through contracts, the process of buying a house. They help you get ready for purchasing a home. So they really are a great way to start with your purchase. So in a buyer consultation, you can get all your questions answered and get the process started on the right foot, and make sure the agent you're talking to is someone you want to work with, and then you can work through that contract and maybe negotiate a few of the details in the contract before you feel pressured into signing it. I love meeting with buyers in these buyers consultations, so if you feel like you are at the point where you need to set one of these up, feel free to give me a call, text, email, or even schedule a Zoom call with me. All that information is in the description below this video. One of the second big hurdles from these rule changes is you have to figure out who is going to pay the buyer's agent compensation. Before the laws, it was industry standard that the seller paid this out of the sale price of the home. And in my opinion, that is still what is going forward most of the time. Before these rule changes, the average price point out there for a buyer agent compensation that was listed on the MLS was 2.5% in our area. Now, this number was not standard by any means. I've seen $1. 1% was uncommon, but you saw it every once in a while. And anywhere from 2 to 3% was very common, with the average being 2.5% in our area. Probably 80% offering 2.5%, with 90% of the crowd overall offering somewhere between the 2 and 3% of the offer price. Now, with the rule changes, this number is not published, but I believe that what the sellers are offering is still pretty standard in our area. You just don't know it until we write offers. So by signing that buyer's representation agreement with a set fee, the buyer isn't saying that they have to pay that fee out of their pocket. They're just saying the agent has to be paid that fee in the end somehow. Now, it is still allowable for the sellers to pay that, and I found in most cases the seller is willing to pay most, if not all, of that fee, which would leave the buyer with none of the fee, or maybe just a small portion of the fee at the end of the transaction. So after the NAR changes, we have adopted a new form in our area called the Seller Contribution Addendum, where with your offer, you put in what you want your agent to get paid, and then the seller either accepts to pay that amount or accepts to pay a portion or none of that amount. And that's how you get those negotiations started for who is paying the real estate agent. Again, in my experience over the past few months, I have found that almost everyone is willing to pay most of that fee, if not all of that fee. And of course, there is a percentage of people out there that have been unwilling to pay that fee. That's not new to the real estate industry. It's just harder to find those people now with these changes. But those houses still are going to sell eventually. It might just take a little negotiating with your agent and with the seller to get those fees paid and get the houses under contract. Now, the third big change for buyers in the real estate industry would be talking to your lender about these commissions. Some loans allow these to be written into the loan and some don't. It depends on the down payment amount, the loan type, how much money is available to be paid by the seller towards these kind of funds if the seller is unwilling to pay these funds. So again, like I said, in most circumstances, this conversation with the lender is going to go fine, and in the end the seller is going to pay it. It's not going to be an issue. But if you find a house, the seller is unwilling to pay this fee, and you love the house and you want to continue forward with it anyways, even though there's going to be a little bit more money on the top for you, then you want to have a plan in place going forward so you don't have to come up with something on the spot. Now, depending on the loan program, there are multiple ways to get this done, either negotiating with the seller or just incorporating a little bit more into the loan. But when you're meeting with your lender, make sure you set a budget so if this circumstances arises, you don't go over your budget and become house poor just because of these extra fees that are going to be added on to the loan. As you know, the real estate market changes all the time, and how the buyer's agent contributions or buyer's agent fee is negotiated into a contract will definitely change with the market. So the first market condition is going to be a seller's market. Now, in this market, it's going to be the worst for buyers that need the seller to pay this fee. If there's multiple offers on a property, what the seller cares about is going to be how much money they make on the home sale. Now, if you have to have the seller pay your buyer's agent fee, that's obviously going to reduce how much money they make. Versus if someone offers them the same asking price but does not have that fee included, that seller's automatically going to make a little higher percentage off of that sale. So of course there are ways around this, with either just offering a larger sum to try to get over that hurdle or taking the buyer's agent fee on yourself. But in the seller's market, this buyer agent compensation can be the hardest out of any market conditions. Currently in 2025, we are in a balanced market where there is no serious advantage to buyers or sellers. Of course, in different circumstances, different price ranges, you can have a little bit of a change, but overall in the market, there is no advantage to either party. So in a balanced market and in a buyer's market, it's going to be much easier to get the seller to pay for the buyer agent compensation than it will be in a seller's market. Because in either of these markets, usually you'll be the only one writing an offer for that property, so the seller will have less options and you won't be going against a person that's buying cash and paying their own agent out of their pocket. Now, I've mentioned buying with cash multiple times. I'm not saying that just because you're buying with cash, you need to pay your own agent fee. Actually, I would still recommend trying to get the seller to pay for it unless you are in one of those multiple offer situations. Now, the projected change in the real estate industry from this lawsuit change was that there would be major changes in the way buyers agents are paid. Now, we have not seen this happen yet, but overall they were hoping that the fee for the buyer's agent would be decoupled from the seller and that it wouldn't be something that the seller has to pay. Of course, we're still seeing that at this point, but it could change at some point in the future. The plaintiffs were also hoping that fees would change, maybe be able to negotiate fees more, there'd be more fee transparency, which I do believe that that is one of the great benefits of this, that you are a little bit more in control of that fee and it's a little bit more transparent. And it is possible that you start seeing flat rate fees, just a dollar amount, or maybe even hourly fees, or a la carte options where maybe agents won't do showings for you, but they will write contracts for you for a set amount. Overall, it is possible to see that this buyer agent fee is decoupled from the seller, but at this point we have not seen it. And honestly, I don't expect to see it happen in the near future. Well, I hope you found this video informative. I had a lot of fun researching the topic and making the video for you. But if you need to schedule one of those buyer's agent consultations, meet with me and kind of talk through options moving forward, whether you need to move in a day, a week, a month, or a year, I'd be happy to chat with you. Feel free to reach out with the contact information in the description below. But for now, I hope to show you around town.